Hey, Ronan Dave here, and as an avid Game of Thrones fan, I thought I'd throw my 2 cents into the discussion of the recent episode that's got a lot of people hot and bothered. The last episode really got people angry, and a lot of people lost faith in one of the main characters, or I should say one of the main contenders for the Iron Throne, that being Stannis Baratheon. So anyway, I just want to kind of give my 2 cents about Stannis, kind of explain, or not really defend, but at least try to understand why he did what he did, but then basically point out why I think Stannis was always a bad choice to be the king of Westeros. Alright, now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. I would say after Episode 9, Stannis the Mannis is now Stannis the Fanless. Stannis Baratheon, first of his name and the last guy you'd want to invite to a family barbecue, I think burned a lot of bridges with viewers and fans of his, or former fans of his, when he willingly allowed his daughter to be burned at the stake alive. And just for the promise of some kind of assistance from a rather dubious Lord of Light to take a secondary objective from a pair of lords that very few people in the Seven Kingdoms care about, especially in the North. Now, because of what Stannis did, in Episode 10, we have a battle set up where nobody really is going to be vested in who wins. You have Machiavellian, backstabbing, raping, flaying psychopaths versus ruthless, burning religious fanatics and their loyal-to-money mercenaries. Who do you root for? At this point, I'm rooting for Team White Walker. Now, with Stannis, I admit, in the second season, I didn't care for him very much when he was introduced. I saw him as an interfering bore, and was certainly on the side of the Lannisters in the Battle of Blackwater Bay. And that's saying something, to be on the side of Joffrey and Cersei. Over the seasons 3 through 5, I did start to grudgingly admire Stannis. Partly what appealed to me, and I imagine to many of his fans, or former fans, was his sense of duty, honor, and justice. Granted, it was a very strict code with little leniency, but it was far better than a number of other people running around Westeros with less principles than jackals. Another thing that helped me win me over to his side was Davos. Davos the Onion Knight. Davos has always been a rather honorable guy, ironically, despite being a smuggler. Him vouching for Stannis made me think that Stannis had some redeemable qualities, and that he certainly was a good contender for the Iron Throne. And then the other aspect of Stannis I admired, or I had admired, was his love for his daughter and his unwillingness to let her die from grayscale. And because of those things, I was willing to overlook his glaring weaknesses, which should or would have made, or make, depending on how the story goes, make him a lousy king. But anyway, first of all, I want to talk about Stannis' strength and somewhat defend, or at least explain, his actions in that Episode 9. Oh, and by the way, this is, my opinion mainly comes from the show, not the book. So, Bookerson's, spare me the, but in the book, blah, 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 blah. Anyway. Stannis, I feel, is not ambitious, or at least not as ambitious as many other characters are in the story. He says it himself, he did not seek to become king. In Stannis' world, I feel there's an order to things. Robert was his elder brother, and he was a king. After a rebellion, and I should say he was a king after a rebellion that Stannis reluctantly joined against the rightful king. And after that, Stannis put up with Robert's misuse and abuse of him, because to Stannis that was the way of things. When Robert died, and Lord Stark revealed that Joffrey was an illegitimate incest bastard, Stannis felt it was his duty to accept the kingship because he felt that that was what was required of him. Had Joffrey not been exposed, Stannis would have just stayed put, I imagine. Renly, his younger brother, went against this natural order because, unlike Stannis, he actually was ambitious, being egged on by his boyfriend. Renly should have fallen in line and supported his older brother's claim to the throne, and when he didn't, Renly was punished. My feeling is I don't feel that Stannis kills because he wants to, and certainly not because he enjoys it. He kills because he feels he has to do it for the greater good of the kingdom. He kills because people have made mistakes that he feels are irredeemable. He sees or saw the wars of Robb Stark, Balon Greyjoy, and the Lannisters as hurting the kingdom, his kingdom, and its people, his people, which is why he wanted all of them punished for the damage and death they had caused. Stannis is certainly a brave and strategic commander. He doesn't lead from behind. He held out at the siege of Storm's End and smashed Greyjoy's fleet. At the Battle of Backwater Bay, he was the first up on the walls. And this despite losing so many men to the wildfire. He was still willing to push forward. And he almost would have won if it hadn't been for Tyrion's surprise attack on the gate attackers and Tywin and Loras' unexpected arrival. And also with that, he is persistent. Most people would have given up after that battle, but he refused to do so because of the demands of justice and duty. Basically, Stannis wants order in a world that has been plunged into chaos. I think this is what makes him appealing to a lot of people. Stannis is simple and uncompromising. But he looks beyond to the greater good and is willing to sacrifice all for that cause. Now, speaking of sacrifice, a heated subject at the moment, we have to remember our own sordid history in that regard. Human sacrifice was practiced throughout the world in just about every culture, and it wasn't always done as evil practices for evil gods. Many times they were done for what was seen as the greater good. The Aztecs sacrificed thousands to keep the sun burning in the sky. Carthaginian parents supposedly sacrificed their children for the favors of the gods. Many cultures sacrifice servants, willing servants, many times to serve their masters in the afterlife. In our age of disbelief, Stannis just comes off as insane for sacrificing people. But from his perspective, he does have good reason to give his crazy witch credit. He's seen her drink poison and live, which killed another person. She killed Renly with dark magic. 2 of the 3 people he wanted dead died after burning the leeches filled with Gendry, Robert's bastards, blood. She told him that he would need Davos, and it was Davos who secured the loan from the Iron Bank so that they could hire an army and continue the struggle. And looking at the preview for episode 10, it looks like there'll be some kind of thaw that will allow Stannis and his army to move forward and attack Winterfell. So he does have good reason to believe in this Lord of Light and Melisandre, his witch, because of what he has seen and the results that have been. And in episode 9, Stannis found himself in a very difficult pinch. Defying all military logic and logistics, somehow Ramsay and his 20 men just happened to hit all the siege equipment and most of the food stores without anyone noticing them. You can tell I had a bit of a problem with that whole idea. I would have liked it better had it been that Ramsay and his men kept hitting them repeatedly, bit by bit over a series of nights. That would have made more sense, rather than in just one amazing surprise attack they were able to do this much damage. So Stannis was in a position he couldn't go back and he couldn't go forward, and he had an army of hungry mercenaries who might easily have turned on him. By making that sacrifice, Stannis could show his soldiers that he was doing it for their sake and for the sake of the greater good. But even if Stannis had not burned his daughter alive in that episode, I still think Stannis was not the best choice for the Iron Throne for several reasons. The problem with Stannis is he's way too strict, he doesn't inspire devotion, and he's dominated by a crazy religious fanatic. In regards to his strictness, the story of the Onion Knight is a great example of what's wrong with Stannis. Davos, the Onion Knight, on his own volition, he decided to risk his life to aid Stannis when he was besieged at Storm's Inn during Robert's rebellion. And by doing that, he helped Stannis hold out and eventually be successful. Stannis rewarded Davos on one hand, and then removed his hand digits on the other because Davos had been a smuggler. Now, most rational people in Stannis' position would have easily overlooked the smuggling, or given a much lighter punishment outweighed by the reward. Plenty of other people in his position would have balked at this and bolted. Certainly, that story would make a number of people reluctant to help Stannis in the future if they had so much of a history of rampant jaywalking. The problem about this strictness is that it would make for a very tyrannical reign with very little freedom. It'd be long on rules and short on mercy, to the point of none. True, there'd be little corruption and crime, but people would live in constant fear of Stannis' notion of justice. The biggest weakness of Stannis, though, is of course his religion. Even if Stannis himself isn't exactly a born-again Lord of Lightis, look what he has allowed to be done. He has allowed the witch Melisandre to do all kinds of bad things. The kind of things that would have got her kicked out of the Spanish Inquisition for being too cruel. He allowed her to make a shadow demon baby which killed his brother Renly in a dishonorable fashion. He allowed her to burn his own brother-in-law and his family alive because they blasphemed against the all-powerful but apparently insecure Lord of Light. He allowed her to burn Mance Rayder in front of his people just because he wouldn't bend the knee. Mance was lucky, though, that Jon Snow put him out of his misery. Too bad he wasn't there for Shireen. Now, just for a moment, let's imagine Stannis rose up and became the Mannis we thought he was, and refused to burn his daughter at the last minute. And he went on to win the throne. You'd still have those religious fanatics like Melisandre, unless he decided to turn against her completely. You would have Melisandre, with Stannis' approval, burning hundreds for blasphemy, and anytime the rain didn't fall on time. And when you think about it, Melisandre and her Lord of Light makes the High Sparrow and the Faith Militant look more like overzealous Bible school students in comparison. At least the Faith Militant punish those who they believe actually committed sin. They don't advocate burning innocent people alive for strategic favors in the secular world. And really, any God requiring you to burn your child alive for a blessing is not a God worth following, in my humble opinion. So, even if Stannis hadn't burned Shireen, you would have a king who is very, very strict, punishments that were very, very harsh, and you would have the crazy religious fanatics all over the place. So that's why he never really was a good choice to begin with. Now, do I think that Stannis the now Fanless Mannis is the worst person in Westeros? Well, it depends on how you look at it. I mean, sure, Joffrey was a bastard in every which way, but he was a cruel person, and nobody was rooting for him. The same with Ramsay Snow/Bolton. He's not a protagonist character. Everybody's hoping he'll get his comeuppance. With Stannis, though, the problem with Stannis is he's all about honor and justice, but where is the justice in burning innocents? His religion is causing him to sacrifice his principles, and in effect making him one of the most dangerous things to Westeros. Like, Joffrey was randomly evil. Ramsay is randomly and somewhat calculatingly evil, but he doesn't just go out killing people for some silly notion because they're not worshiping the new god. Under Joffrey, you had a very cruel and petty king, but he had people around him who were able to keep the kingdom going and not be so tyrannical as Joffrey he himself was in person. With Daenerys, yeah, she has a bit of trouble, a bit of bloodthirst in her, feeding a master to a dragon. But again, she also has people around her that can help her rule better. Stannis, he doesn't really take advice from many people. He kind of listens to Davos, one of the most honorable people in Westeros, but only just so far, because he burned his brother-in-law, and he killed his brother through black magic, and now he's burned his daughter. So Davos's influence on Stannis is much, much less than, say, Tyrion on Joffrey or Tyrion on Daenerys. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on the matter. I'm certainly not giving up on the show. I can't wait for the next episode and the next season. Even though I have no vested interest in who wins the Battle of Winterfell now, for the reasons I already stated. As for Stannis, I just wonder if he'll go the way of Agamemnon, that other daughter killer, for the sake of ambition. Will Brienne get justice for Renly and Shireen? What is Davos going to do? But what I hope the show does is, if they are planning to have Stannis fall, and by fall I mean die, I hope they have him come to a final realization on how wrong he has been in following Melisandre and her obvious demonic Lord of Light, and that he kills her before he dies himself. That would be an ending that would satisfy me at this point. But anyway, looking forward to future Game of Thrones. See ya.